All right, period 4. So I'm obviously not here today. Sub should have given you a handout on 4.1, which is like domain and range. So we're starting a new unit, which is about functions. And today we're just going to be learning about the domain and range of functions. So just a quick note, instead of saying y equals, we're just going to replace y with f of x. We've seen this before. We just call that function notation. And the unit will kind of talk a little bit more about that too. So when we think about domain and range, hopefully you covered a little bit in middle school, but domain is basically the x values or input values. You can put that on your notes, but they are the x values or input values. So it's basically what do you plug in for x, right? So like whether it's a line or a quadratic or new types of functions, which we'll talk about today, whatever you plug in is your domain. And then the range is whatever results. So like results, range, same thing, but those are the y values or the f of x values. So like on terms of a graph, that's like the vertical axis and the x is like the horizontal axis. But the range is what you get out after you've plugged in x. What kind of numbers do you get out? A good thinking question is like what functions will have domain restrictions. We're actually going to cover that later. So since I'm not here, we'll skip over that. Now graphically, yeah, domain is what you plug in for x, so that's the stuff on the x-axis, right? And then the range is what you get out for y, so that's on the y-axis. But when you think about domain, right, if you have a picture of a graph that goes from here to here, you might say like, what's the domain? Well, it's the graph from left to right. So like I want you to think about domain as like from left to right on a graph. So I'm actually going to put that on here. Like, so domain is like on a graph. It's your x values, but those go from left to right. So it's like, where do I have graph from left to right? And you do want to think left because that's like the smallest values. So we're going to actually use interval notation again for domain and range. So it's smallest to biggest. And then range, right? So it's the stuff on the y-axis. And with the range, we're going to say from bottom to top or from low to high, right? So if you think about, again, that graph that we just had, from left to right, looks like it's like -5 for x values to +3 for x values, right? Those would be like your domain. But then in terms of range, right, it looks like the lowest y value you have is 1, and the biggest y value you have is 3. So that would be like from 1 to 3, low to high for the y values. So, right, pictures of graphs have both x and y values. So domain is left to right, which is the x values. Range is low to high, which is the y values. Now, practice. So state the domain and range of the following. So I'm just going to draw a picture of a graph, and then I want you to like pause the video and then play it, after a couple of these pictures. So when you think about this one, what if I just gave you a picture of a graph that was like from here, and then it went to here, right? And if I said, what is the domain and range of that red shape? So it kind of looks like a parabola, but it like stops and stops here. All right, so you can pause the video, write down a domain, write down a range, and then you can resume it. All right, so if you've tried this one, right, you think the domain is, domain would be the x values that you have from left to right. So you can see the graph starts over here at the left. That's the furthest left value, and that's at -3. And the furthest at the right that the graph goes is right there, which is also at +3. So the domain is basically all the x values between -3 and 3. So we're going to use that in interval notation. So we're going to say -3 to 3. Now we use brackets because it's included, but if I actually did an open circle instead of a closed circle, then you would use a parenthesis around the second 3. And then the range is like from low to high. So if you think about the lowest y value that you have, well, the lowest y value that I have right there, that's at -1. And then the highest y value that I have looks like it's right there at +1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be like a range from -1 to +4. That's your first example. We're going to do one more. All right, second example here. I'm going to actually draw like a parabola. So we'll go like a parabola that is there. So pause the video, do domain and range, and then resume the video when you're done. All right, so for the second example, right, we're going to just put D for domain and R for range. Now, if you notice, this one's weird because it's got lines like left and right. So The domain is like, what could I plug in? So my question is, yes, this line will continue to go up forever, but as it goes up, it is also still continuing to the left. So that's actually going to go left forever. And same thing with this one. Yes, it goes up, but it also continues to the right. So the domain always goes left and always goes right. So that domain is actually going to be negative infinity to infinity, right? It goes left forever, right forever. There's also no gaps in between. You think about it like it's continuous everywhere, so it's negative infinity to infinity for the domain. The range is like from low to high, right? So, it doesn't really matter what you plug in. You are never going to get any values down here ever for y values, right? So when you think about the range, you want to think, where's the lowest point? So the lowest point, you can see it's right there, right at -1. So the range would be from -1. And then, yeah, these arrows, in addition to going left and right, they go up forever. So from low to high, the lowest is -1 and the highest would be infinity. So that would be your range for that one. So good for you if you got it.